Welcome to my TOA level 500 post commentary for budget gear. Quick note is this was recorded live over on Twitch. I had my webcam turned off so I could focus and my mic turned off. However, you're going to see some pop-ups on the screen, some of my overlays from Twitch. Don't worry about that. Also, this is going to be very minimally edited. It's mostly just a post commentary. I'm going to do a little bit of editing to fast forward the parts where there's nothing going on, and I'll put some stuff up on the screen to hopefully help you just a little bit. Useful information such as the invocation list, tile markers, and helpful discords and other YouTube channels that you can watch in order to improve at your 500 or get some additional information for your 500, as well as my specific run here. All of those links are going to be down in the description. Be sure to check those out. I think it's worth mentioning that although this was only my third attempt with these invocations, it took me about 40 attempts just messing around with invocations, messing around with different item loadouts, messing around with different inventories before I found one that really worked for me and my gear and I'm an Ironman, so instead of my budget, it was, my circumstance. But if it takes you a long time to find out what's going to work, don't let that dishearten you. Once you find the right thing, whether that's copying mine or looking at mine and tweaking it just a little bit, it suddenly gets a lot easier. With that said, let's get into the meat of the run here. I'll go over my strategy and thoughts and decision making in each of the rooms. I'll also show you where I made big mistakes. And I would say in each of the rooms, I made at least one pretty large mistake that cost me a lot of resources or almost cost me the runs. Hopefully that'll show you that if you're better at the game than I am, or if you're at about a similar skill level, but you just happen to make some mistakes and you're inconsistent, you're totally fine. You can still do a 500, you can still get by. You just need a run where all of the things kind of come together at once. So starting with Zebak, what I'm going to do here is in every boss room, I'm going to quickly pause the screen and go over some useful information to consider while watching my gameplay. So let's do that now. First thing we're going to do is sip a super combat and try to land a BGS. Then we're going to stay on this left side of the room here. It is usually the easiest solve for the first acid spray. This whole room we're going to lazy flick rigor, however it's very worth learning how to one tick. We're also going to keep preserve on just to keep our pre-pot lasting throughout the whole fight. We're going to flick the mage prayer in between attacks whenever there's a blood barrage. Also, you should mark the max distance with tile markers that your weapon can attack from. If you have a Bofa and full crystal, you should be using that for this budget run. However, if you have Armadillo and an ACB, that's just fine too. I'm going to let the rest of Zebak play out. I will put a timestamp up on the screen for the next point that I pause the gameplay and give a few pointers. Alright, at this point we are getting ready for the second acid spray, and we have 100% special attack. If your first BGS missed, you can try to land a second, otherwise you can use your ZCB/ACB special attack, or if you use a blowpipe on one of the jugs in this room, you can actually heal a decent chunk of health with a blowpipe spec. It could be a great way to make up for some mistakes. Stay towards the middle of the room for the second acid spray solve. Keep your true tile turned on. If you don't use it, I highly recommend it. You can use it to help skip and navigate through some of the acid in here. Remember, all damage you avoid is prayer saved. Once again, I will put a timestamp up on the screen so that you know when I give my next input. We only have one last thing to say about Zebak. This room is really easy, so you really shouldn't struggle much with it. As we approach the Enrage phase, we're going to run to the far sides of the room and stand on these little bridges. From here, there's a 50% chance that when the blood spawns spawn, they won't even be able to see you. They'll be on the far side of the room and they won't aggro you. It's one less thing to worry about. You can turn off Preserve. Your goal throughout the entirety of Zebak is to only use 1 or 2 restore sips. If you have a bad run like I did here, you might end up using 3. As you can see, I have low health. I took a lot more damage than I should have, and I got smited and had to take 1 extra sip. Again, this room is really easy. You shouldn't have much issue with it. I promise you, you can make it through here no problem. On the screen, I will have the timestamp for when we start the next room, Kephri. Okay, starting Kephri, same thing. We're going to sip a super combat and try to land a BGS. The BGS is fairly inaccurate, but it is very worth trying to land. It will persist all the way until the final phase where Kephri's shield is down and it's HP only. Up until that point, your BGS will reduce its defense even between phases. Again, in this room, we're going to lazy flick Piety and eventually camp some overhead prayers. However, again, it's worth learning how to one-tick flick and preserve as much prayer as you possibly can in this room. We're going to drop our first poop path in this northeast corner. We're going to drop them all in this corner until after we kill the first ranger. This corner will separate the ranged scarab from the melee scarab, allowing us to kill them individually without taking damage from both at the same time. One of the strategies we will utilize in this room is popping the dark brown eggs whenever Kephri does an egg attack. This will decrease the number of poop specials versus egg specials and reduce the chip damage that we'll take from the agile scarabs. If you use your Karis passive, you can heal off of hitting these eggs. It'll cost 5 prayer points to heal 12 health. Not a bad trade. Try to only use it in emergencies though. Additionally, you can use Death Charge on the Arceus spellbook to regain some special attack energy when popping eggs. You should also use Death Charge whenever you're killing the Overlord scarabs. The timestamp is up on the screen for the next commentary. So in the background here, I do make a mistake. I should be standing on that tile that I have marked number 3 and dropped the poop there to create a corner that we'll be doing the ranged trap in. I'll go over the ranged trap a little more in depth shortly. Anytime you take poison damage, you should be taking a sip of your Sandfew to clear the poison. The ranger has the ability to poison you. And you should keep your stats topped up with the rest of your super combat sips. If you're using the Amulet of Blood Fury, you should be able to passively heal up some of the chip damage you're taking. Otherwise, again, you can use your Karis passive to heal. At this point, you may notice that your run energy is starting to get a little low. You should be walking the bombs instead of running them whenever you're confident that you can do so without taking any damage or without losing DPS. The only way that you can regain run energy in this room, aside from walking and regenerating it naturally, is to use a Karis spec. Try to avoid that at all costs, but it's useful information in case of emergency that a Karis spec will give you max run energy. Now let me show you how and why we are trapping the ranger. The reason we're going to trap the ranger instead of the second melee is because the melee just takes too long to kill with our trident. Additionally, the ranger can be trapped and totally ignored. We do not have to kill it. So I should have already dropped a poop on that tile marked number 3 to create a corner, as I mentioned before. Because I didn't do it, I'm going to avoid killing Kephri right now and wait for the next poop attack so that I can land it on that corner. There it is. So we're going to step back onto this tile, create our corner, and then phase Kephri. We're going to run to the other side of the room to that far tile labeled RT. We actually could have started this portion of the phase there. And we're going to turn on Protect Melee because we are now out of range of the ranger. Only the melee scarab can hit us. We're going to dodge our bombs and run to this next tile marked RT and then go straight back to hitting the arcane. As long as we run to that tile, the ranger cannot target us. Now we're going to run to this far west wall where it says a drag range. By running there, we drag the ranger all the way into that north corner, and it cannot hit us anywhere on the southern side of the room now. So we can kill the meleeer in peace. After the melee is dead, we can turn on Protect from Range to avoid the chip damage from the scarabs, but anywhere along the southern side of Kephri will no longer take any damage from the ranger. We could completely ignore it for this entire phase. I will put up the timestamps for our final notes on Kephri. Now that only the southern side of the room is safe for us, we need to make sure we are being very efficient with how we stack the poop so that we don't run out of space to hit Kephri. You can see that I am basically out of run energy, so at this point I need to walk the bombs in order to preserve it. And just a reminder that when you finish this final phase, you do that last bit of damage, Kephri will do a forced poop attack. It's pretty important that you don't accidentally time this with one of her regular poop attacks, as if she hits you with both at the same time, you may get pushed into that eastern or western quadrant and end up in attack range of the ranger. A quick reminder that the tile markers are linked in the description. Your goal in this room is to also only use a couple sips of restores. In this run, I used 1 Sandfuse sip and 2 restore sips. Timestamp up on the screen for when we are done killing Kephri. For this strategy, we are going to be taking power both times from the Helpful Spirit, as we need both salts and both guaranteed adrenaline potions. Every now and then you may get a chaos that has a restore plus a salt or adrenaline, and maybe that works for your strategy. For me, I just always chose power. Timestamp for when Akkha begins. As we begin the room, remind yourself of what room level Akkha is. I got level 2, which is the best RNG you can get. It means it hasn't leveled up since the start of the raid. Level 4 would mean that there is 6 memory blast instead of 5, so keep that in mind. Organize your inventory and take your first dose of salt. Despite using a trident, we're going to try to butterfly most of this room. I use a 5-tick butterfly method because it's easier, and when I started learning TOA, the 5-tick method was the only one that existed, but there's 4-tick methods out there which will increase the DPS of your trident significantly. So you should go out of your way, get the tile markers for a 4-tick setup instead of a 5, but if you're used to a 5 like I am here, it's not the end of the world. So let me slow down the video and pop up some pointers for you. Obviously, we're going to butterfly whenever possible. Because we're running double trouble, every time Akkha does a special attack, we're going to have the trailing orbs follow us as well. An easy way to deal with this while doing butterfly is to end on the attack tile near the center of the room. So in my 5-tick cycle, we're going to end on this attack tile right near the center of the room. It's a 2-tile movement from our previous location, meaning when we end there, we won't land on one of our own orbs. Additionally, the center tile is an even number of tiles from every other quadrant in the room, meaning if you have to deal with the memory special attack, you can also safely move to the starting quadrant without worrying about landing on an orb. So I'm going to keep the video slightly slowed down and show you how I deal with double trouble feeling special for the memory attack. Now, unfortunately, I already clicked to the next location. I should have ended on that top attack tile there. The icons are also a great tile to end on, and I'm just going to plot out my path doing 2-tile movements. And you can tile skip over the orbs like I do here, and we'll get right back into cycle. One tile that might be standing out to you guys if you already have your 5-tick tile markers is the one that has an asterisk in the center of it in each quadrant of the room. The purpose of this tile is this is where we want to stand when we're killing the shadows that Akkha spawns. Now we can't butterfly the shadows because we're using a trident and we will fail the DPS check every time. With my setup using dragon darts in the blowpipe, I never once failed the DPS check and never actually had to do the tile skip for the blast. However, that asterisk tile is the ideal tile to do the skip from, because it puts us an even number of tiles away from that center attack tile, from the center icon, and from every other quadrant in the room. So in just a moment here, you're going to see Akkha use his memory special attack, and you can watch how I path without even having to think. I just click on my tile markers, I click on the icons, and I'm right in the center ready to go. I'm going to let most of the rest of Akkha play out without interruptions and at full speed. If you struggle with Akkha, don't worry, you're not alone. This room is absolutely a wall during the 500. It's the most mechanically complicated. It has the most opportunity to just KO your full health if you make a big mistake. And I want you to watch the mistakes that I make here. I make 2 or 3 almost run-ending mistakes during this 500, and we still pull through to the end. So watch the mistakes I make, watch how I panic and end up recovering from them, and hopefully that'll give you a little bit of confidence in your runs if you're making mistakes, but also it'll hopefully show you how to recover from those mistakes. I'll put a timestamp up on the screen when I give my next input. As we enter Come phase, make sure your HP is as full as can be or have a Karis ready. In this case, I have above 99 HP since I had to Karis earlier, and I also have Redemption up, meaning I can get hit like 5 times. Have your vertical camera unlocked, check your cardinals, then diagonals, it just makes it a little bit easier. Find large openings, move to those, and then quickly solve how to weave back in and get an attack off. If you lower your DPS by being too careful, it'll probably get you killed in the end, so prioritize DPS. I know everyone hates this phase, but I actually kind of enjoy it. It is very frustrating when you lose a good run at this point though. But congratulations, the hardest part of the 500 is basically over. Akkha's definitely the wall, so if you made it this far, it's smooth sailing from here. I'll put a timestamp up on the screen to let you know when we start Baba. This is the only puzzle room that really requires any commentary. You should try to memorize the waves to some extent, just so you can get your protection prayers right before they spawn. Use your Karis passive and death charge throughout this room to keep your health topped up and your special attack topped up. Don't worry about immediately restoring your prayer. You should wait and see if you end up getting venomed by standing in the acid pool. If that happens, then you can sip a sand few to clear the venom as well as restore your prayer without wasting any prayer points. Prioritize the shamans as they spawn, and keep in mind that the cursed baboons and the thralls don't count for spawning the next wave, meaning it can sometimes be beneficial to clear as much of the wave as you can before focusing the other baboons and spawning the next one. When using melee, you should use your 4-tick weapon, such as your tent whip, instead of using the fang. It's going to perform a lot better in this room. And finally, you'll notice that I camp my prayers quite a bit. I keep my overheads up. I don't really do very much prayer flicking unless I'm using rigor to kill a shaman. Again, this is another room where if you're good at prayer flicking and preserving supplies, or if you chose to bring ancients and use blood barrage and ice barrage in here, you'll use a lot less prayer, and then you can adjust your inventory requiring either less super restores or adjust your gear prioritizing more DPS instead of prayer bonus. Baba timestamp. Starting Boba, we're going to take another salt and equip our BGS. I learned Red X about 2 hours before this attempt, and I only had about 20 minutes to practice it. So if you're good at Red X, you're going to use even less supplies than I do, which again allows you to prioritize more DPS or more switches. If you're bad at Red X or new to it, you can watch my simple setup here and see how I do it. I have my BGS ready to spec and my run turned off. When Baba's in attack range, I'm going to hit her, walk to this highlighted tile, and begin the cycle. Once you get to that highlighted tile, you click on the obelisk, you move forward 2 tiles, and you attack her. And it's just back and forth, wait for the blast to go off, red click, 2 tiles, attack, red click, 2 tiles, attack. Very simple cycle. Baba is of course possible without Red X, but I highly recommend that you learn how to do it. The supply drain of getting hit constant 30s through prayer from this boss is just not worth it. Most of this room is solved by just doing Red X perfectly. However, I'll slow down the video and put up some pointers, just some things to consider while you're doing Red X. After your initial BGS, you should save all of your special attack for the Karis in case of emergencies. Use your control click to toggle, run, and walk. It's a lot easier than manually clicking the orb. And of course, watch Baba's health at 66 and 33% health so you don't end up in the gap while walking underneath her. If you fail Red X and baboons spawn, in the early phases of the fight, you should kill them and use Death Charge. You're going to take some damage from Baba and you're going to have to reset up Red X, but you don't want this whole room with Sarcophagus open. If it's the final phase and you're in Red X, you can continue as planned without killing them. If you fail Red X and Baba throws boulders at you, just be prepared, have a plan on if you're going to run to one of the rocks or if you have to go to a nearby sarcophagus instead. I'll let the rest of Baba play out here. You're going to watch me make a lot of mistakes and once again almost die in this room. Hopefully that gives you a lot of confidence that you don't need a perfect run, especially if you're using this setup with high prayer bonus and a lot of restores and very safe strategies, so you always have a Karis spec available in case you make mistakes. If one of these last 2 rooms, Baba or Akkha, is troubling you, you can use a single adrenaline sip. So an example would be use an adrenaline during Akkha come phase, so you get 2 Karises if that's something you really struggle with, or using an adrenaline for Baba to make sure a BGS lands while still having a backup Karis ready to go. You only need 3 adrenaline sips for Wardens. I personally just like having 4, so I didn't use any here. Here's a timestamp for when we're done with Baba. From the helpful spirit, once again, we're going to take power. Again, based on your preference, you might be able to get away with a chaos for an additional restore if the other item in chaos happens to be an adrenaline or assault, depending on your needs. You've already made it through the hardest part of a 500 in my opinion. Wardens really isn't that bad as long as you're good at P3 Enrage. Real quick, I just want to say, if you've made it this far into the video, please consider subscribing and leaving a like. If you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below. I'd be happy to help you get your Fang Kit. You can also join my Discord and reach out to me there. Beginning P1, I recommend you run a DPS calc with your specific gear to find out if you should be using a Bofa, your crossbow, the Fang, or a blowpipe on the obelisk. With my specific setup, if our BGS hits, we're going to use the blowpipe. If it misses or if it hits exceptionally low, we're going to have to use the crossbow. Unfortunately, the BGS is pretty inaccurate on the obelisk, and it hitting really determines how smooth the beginning of Wardens is going to be for you. It can be the difference between tanking 1 or 2 sets of orbs versus tanking 2 to 4 sets of orbs. Let me quickly slow down the video and go over some pointers for P1. You can only attempt 1 spec because you need to save the rest for your Karis. We're going to tank on the left side of the room or the east side to spawn Zebak and Baba for P3. And we can either tank to 75 health while using rapid heal to get up to 76. Orb sets deal 75 damage, that'll leave us with 1 health left after the orbs to use our Karis. Or the method I chose here instead is to tank to about 70 health, use your Karis after the first orb, and let the second one damage you after your health is already restored. I'm going to let P1 play out at full speed here. It's really simple. You just want to do high DPS to tank less sets of orbs. It's just a DPS check. Make sure you use your Karis at good timing, and you keep your prayer maxed out. I'll throw up the timestamp for when we start P2. For P2, my tile markers are kind of messy, but I like to camp this corner and have my diagonals marked. This specific tile is my favorite to deal with the special attacks from. One method that is definitely worth learning, but I didn't know about during my 500, is if you tank this Warden in melee range with Protect Melee on, it can only max you a 4 instead of a 10, which is a lot less chip damage and a lot less prayer drain. This is another useful piece of knowledge that'll help you bring more DPS into this fight instead of prayer bonus and restores. Let me slow down the action and pop up some useful information to get you through P2 of this fight. Assuming your original adrenaline has already run out, be prepared to use another adrenaline sip if you have to Karis. If you're bringing Death Charge, don't forget to use that for the core. You will get your special attack restored for every down. We're aiming to get a 4 down with this setup using our whip and last hitting with the BGS on the core. The most important down is the first to make sure you get it below 80% health, so make sure you're prepared quickly with Piety on and your full melee switch. You want to get 5 whip hits into a 6th hit with your BGS. I'm going to let the rest of P2 play out. Just watch when I choose Dakaris and how I handle the core downs. Make sure you count your attacks and you pay attention to what % health remaining the core has so you know how many attacks you'll get in. I make plenty of mistakes just like I do in every other room, so you can watch those mistakes, watch all the extra damage that I take, and hopefully learn from it so that your run will go even smoother than mine did. I'm going to pop up a timestamp on the screen to let you know when I give my final input on P2. We still have plenty of supplies left, and that's even with all of the mistakes that we've made and unnecessary damage that we've taken. I think that's why I like the setup for my first 500 and why I wanted to share it with you guys is this high prayer bonus, high super restore, very few switch setup opens the door for a lot of mistakes. As long as those mistakes don't get you killed, then you'll have plenty of supplies to survive with. This is also why we turn off acceleration and ancient haste. You can see how if we had to take a whole bunch more orbs from P1, and if we were taking a ton of extra damage right now from P2, things would be looking a lot different. One final piece of advice that I'll give for P2 is something you should already be familiar with, but you can stand 1 or 2 tiles in any cardinal direction of these lightning shadows to avoid their damage completely. I'm going to pop up a timestamp on the screen to let you know when I start P3 of the Wardens fight. Heading into phase 3, we want to take a quick assessment of our supplies, our health, and our special attack. I have full special attack, so I'm going to sip an adrenaline and try to land a BGS spec. The first one lands, which is perfect. We still have one adrenaline sip for the Enrage phase, so we're just going to save that until then. My health is a little low, so I'm going to wait for the first set of skulls and use the Karis passive to heal up. And I'm not even using any prayers. I'm just taking this portion of the fight slow and preserving as many supplies as I can. There's nothing hitting me and there's no timers to worry about, so I'm just going to take it slow and relax until the first set of skulls spawn. So to recap, we're going to start with a BGS and save at least one adrenaline for the Enrage phase. You can preserve your supplies all the way until Zebak spawns, then you should start focusing on, of course, your overhead prayers, but also increasing your DPS. Use your Karis passive on the skulls in between phases to heal up. The skulls will spawn every 20% HP that the Warden is missing. Remember, a 500 Warden is no harder than a 300, it's just going to take longer. That really won't matter until you get to the Enrage phase, especially with this budget gear. If you're anything like me, your nerves are going to be getting to you at this point, so definitely take your time and relax. As the Warden approaches a 20% health threshold, you should say out loud what side the attack cycle is going to start on again. That way when you finish the skull mechanic, you can kind of verbally remember what side is safe. That's something that helps me anyway. If you forget what side is safe, of course you can run to the back of the room and react to the Warden's attack instead. I'll let most of phase 3 Wardens play out here so you can watch. Just keep in mind, where I choose to deal damage, when I put my prayers up, when I use my Karis passive, etc. I'm trying to preserve as many supplies as I can and make it to the Enrage phase with full health. I will put up a timestamp right before we get to the Enrage phase. Enrage phase is going to be really important, so I'm going to go as in depth as I can to make it as easy as possible for you. When the Warden gets below 20% health, this is the last skull mechanic that we'll be able to deal with, so I'm using my Kephri to heal above 99. This is the last opportunity to get free healing above 99 without using special attack energy. When the Warden gets below 5% health is when the Enrage phase will begin. Before that happens, you want to make sure your prayer is topped up to max, your health is as high as it can be, and you have 100% special attack energy. Here's some pointers to help get you through Enrage phase. Sip your adrenaline and start with a ZCB spec. In this run, I chose not to do that and decided to wait to just use my Kephri and heal up. In hindsight, I would have started with a ZCB. Prioritize dodging boulders and getting your prayers correctly. These are going to hurt you the most by far. Lightning is only going to do chip damage. It itself will not KO you. Shadows at their climax are safe to click on, so watch my movement during Enrage phase. You're going to see me click on tiles that do not look safe, but by the time my character arrives there, the lightning has already gone off and it doesn't harm me. You really want to watch your attack timer here. If you click to attack too early, it'll stun you in place for 1 tick, leaving you susceptible to getting hit by lightning. So you don't want to spam attack on the Warden. I do it quite a bit here because I'm nervous. But try to keep in mind that if you're attacking too early, you're actually going to be hurting yourself. If you're doing a run with a Bofa, as you should, this will actually be quite a bit easier for you. Once the Warden gets below about 300 HP, the Bofa starts to outperform the ZCB dramatically, and that's when we're going to be on 1 row of tiles left, which is by far the hardest part to avoid all the chip damage. I like to keep mostly to this left side of the room because it's easier to keep track of what Zebak is attacking me with, but obviously you're just going to move wherever you're safe. It's really important to keep your prayer maxed out here so that you can use your Kephri in a pinch without having to sip a prayer potion first. If you do end up Kephri-ing, like I will in a moment here, you should immediately try to sip another restore, preparing yourself for your next Kephri. You should really use your Kephri above 30 health. Here I let myself get down to 25, which I potentially could have been one hit by a shadow if I didn't get my Kephri off as soon as I did. So it's very dangerous letting your health get too low, but you also don't want to use it too high and be wasteful. You should watch this back a couple times and watch how I weave in and out of the shadows to try to avoid as much chip damage as possible. Again, the fully climax shadow is safe to step on, so I'm just watching the order that they spawn in and dodging back and forth between them. I'm not doing it perfectly here, but this is something that you can practice as much as you want in a lower level raid. If you're using a Bofa instead of a crossbow, you're going to have a much easier time here. You can see how much I'm struggling just to do 24 damage. A Bofa is more accurate, has a higher attack speed, and doesn't struggle quite so much on low health targets. Whereas this crossbow, if I hit a ruby spec right now, it only hurts me. I really hope that this was useful to you guys. I made a lot of mistakes, but that's expected in your first 500. It's expected anytime you try something new and challenging. At this point during the live recording, I turned on my mic and I turned on my webcam, so you'll get to see my beautiful happy face in just a moment here. I want to give you a quick summary of what your main concerns are in a budget 500. For this style, you really want to prioritize range DPS to make that Wardens fight as fast as possible, prayer bonus, and your supply usage. Trying to prayer flick in all of the rooms that you're able to, trying to avoid as much damage as possible so that you don't get smited. Additionally, each room has its own mechanical challenges that you should learn for this kind of run. For example, in Zebak, you should learn the blood safe spots. In Kephri, you should learn how to do the range trap. At Akkha, you need to learn how to do the DPS skip, how to butterfly, how to handle double trouble plus feeling special, and at Tbow, you have to learn how to red X. The last and probably most important thing is just learning how to dodge the lightning during the Warden Enrage. That is where most people are going to fail so many runs. I think the reason I was able to do my Wardens in a relatively low number of attempts is because I used the Fang and melee Wardens for like 200 KC, so I got very good at dealing with 1 row of tiles. There's definitely some variations and alternatives that you could make when it comes to your invocations and gear, but it's a 500, so ultimately you're going to have to master most of the raid and its mechanics before attempting a 500. Once you know those things, it's not as hard as it looks. You just need to run where it all comes together. While you're watching me get a purple alongside my Fang Kit in the background, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this far. I'm going to put a link up on the screen to the mini guide that I made on the 500. It'll give you a different perspective on everything you just watched here. It's a shorter, well-edited, and entertaining video, much more in the style of my normal videos, that covers a lot of what you saw here today, just in a different fashion. Again, all of the useful links are going to be down into the description, the invocation list, the tile markers, and more. I wish you the best of luck on your grind. If you have any questions, just ask them in the comment, pop on over to my Twitch chat, or come join my Discord and I'd be glad to help you out. Speaking of Twitch, if you watch me over at DVST_TV at Twitch, you can watch me do high-level TOAs live with upgraded gear, with upgraded strategies, and it's a blast. I hope I'll see you there.